I wanted to take a moment to talk about our sponsor, Alt21, the foreign exchange and hedging platform that reduces the risk and costs of cross-border transactions. As a board member, there are few better feelings than making a suggestion which adds quick material value to your organisation. I remember when one of our board members saved us $50,000 with a quick introduction to a group discount scheme for one of our key suppliers. I continue to feel grateful to this day. Alt21 can offer exactly this kind of quick win for board members. By using their foreign exchange and hedging services, you could reduce your company's costs by 90%. For a company that has just 10 million foreign exchange exposure through its revenues or cost base, that could be over 300,000 back into the business. Alt21 are so confident that they offer the best value in the market. They show you how much they make from fees in real time before and after any transaction. If you want to save your organisation money on its foreign exchange and hedging, head to alt21.com. That's alt21.com to find out more. Hello and welcome to Enter the Boardroom with Newroll, the podcast exploring what makes great boards and board members. I'm your host, Oliver Cummings, CEO of Newroll, a board search specialist and market leader bringing science to the art of board hiring. Today's guest, Karen Blackett CBE, is a non-executive director of Diageo plc and Creative UK. She also serves as Chancellor of the University of Portsmouth. Karen was formerly UK President of WPP, the world's largest marketing services group, and CEO of Group M UK, WPP's media investment arm. Earlier in her career, she rose to CEO and chair of Mediacom UK, one of the country's leading advertising agencies. Karen has also served as a non-executive director at the UK Cabinet Office and was appointed by Prime Minister Theresa May as the UK's race equality business champion. Karen, a huge welcome and thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
So I wanted to start by talking to you about transformation because you've spent much of your career advising on and leading transformation, which is something many board members will have to deal with at some point in their role. And I wonder whether we could start by just asking you to identify 3 key moments where a board has added most value for you as a CEO or a president on that front.
Look, I think with any transformation, there has to be ambition in order to get it done, and there has to be drive. But I think when you have a board, a good board will prod and will challenge and will help you really firm up whether or not you have the right resource for the transformation. So I think I have received that from a board and I have given that as a board member about the right talent for the transformation that you're trying to do. That means actually having change management specialists come into your organisation and help with that transformation. So a different skill set from what you might normally have within your organisation. And look, when I was CEO of Group M in the UK, we brought in somebody that was a change management specialist. That's not the skill set of the people at Group M. So I think what was really helpful was that challenge about the right people to make it stick. I also think the challenge is always about time as well. And that's the debate that you can have with your board, whether or not you can go faster. That has always been something where a board wants you to do it and do it well. I've had boards that want you to go faster because they're keen to see the change be delivered quickly. But also I've been on boards where it's realistic. If you want the change and the transformation to stick, make sure that you slow your pace. The challenge is always about the speed of transformation. And then it's whether or not you've got fellowship as well. And I think that is key. So making sure that, you know, board members who may have conversations with other members of the team or other members of the organisation, and they feedback that the transformation that you're trying to deliver isn't necessarily being bought into in that part of the organisation. So boards being able to feed back to you whether or not the organisation is with you and following and up to speed, I think is a really good challenge as well.
If I play that back, it's critical to make sure you've got the right people for this unique situation in place. It's critical to be clear about the timing because there'll always be pressure to go
Speed
faster.
of delivery, yeah.
And critical to make sure you thought about building in those feedback loops to check you're taking people with you. Can we just start by going a bit deeper onto that first one of the right people? Does that depend on the size of your organization? Because I guess, I'm thinking about it now. We've just acquired WB Directors. And, we're still a relatively small organization. We've got, whatever it is now, just over 70 people. The idea of bringing someone in as a full-time transformation person feels quite heavy-handed and quite a significant resource, but perhaps I'm missing something there.
I wouldn't bring them in as full-time. I'd bring somebody in as a consultant. So you're right. The size of the organisation determines whether or not it becomes a FTE and part of your team, or it's somebody that comes in and works as a consultant 1 day a week or 2 days a week. But you need that specialist skill set. Does not happen as it should do, or where there's issues is because you're relying on people that have already got a busy day job to then also deliver the transformation and the processes that are needed for the transformation. And they're not specialists in it. They're carrying on with their day job whilst also trying to do this other thing that you've tasked the organisation to do. So I do think you need that change management skill set within the organisation if you want it to stick and you want it to land properly. So the only thing about size of the organisation is whether or not they're a full-time employee or whether or not they become a consultant that you get in 1 day a week, 2 day a week, depending on the size of the transformation that you're doing. But you need that specialist skill set because everybody's still got a day job that hasn't suddenly stopped.
That resonates. I've definitely seen that as an investor in M&A processes where businesses start tanking because the team that are supposed to be running the business end up getting consumed full-time in dealing with the M&A process, whether that's being bought or acquired. It sounded like as a CEO, you brought that person in. For a board member listening whose board is about to go through some sort of transformation and is trying to encourage the CEO to bring in that person in whatever form, whether full-time or part-time, I imagine sometimes you've seen pushback on that. What would you advise that person in how they go about encouraging the CEO to think about that?
I would get them to talk to other CEOs that have undergone transformation processes because there's nothing better than hearing it word of mouth from someone that's gone through it. I would encourage that CEO to look wider than their own organisation and to talk to other CEOs, as I said, or to talk to other organisations that do this. And I say that because I know that other organisations that are fully involved in transformation, of course, they're going to say that you need a specialist skill set, but it's understanding what's involved. Because sometimes I just don't think, if you've not gone through a transformation before, you've got no idea how much it will take out of your people and the team. So I speak to others. If you're unsure, don't take your board's word for it. Actually, start networking with people that have gone through their own transformations so that you can hear the pitfalls and avoid them, and you can hear the stuff that you need to do quickly.
So you said there people struggle to understand if they haven't been involved because they just don't know what is involved. Can you try to bring that to life now for a board member listening to this who hasn't been through that, what exactly that does involve, perhaps by doing a deep dive on an example you've been through?
Look, I think whatever you think the cost is, double it. Whatever you think the time is, double it. Whatever you think the internal communication that's needed, double the frequency. And look, there were some transformations that we went through at Group M where we were trying to centralise some of the specialist activity which some of the agencies would do, and we were trying to centralise that activity at Group M. Those people were then going to become, they were agency people and had agency job titles and were part of an agency culture, and we were trying to centralise them into effectively the HQ for those agencies. That's a lot emotionally for people to go through. One minute you're working for an agency over here, the next minute you're working somewhere else. So what are the stages to get people there? So you can still sit in that agency, your job title changes. It's the steps that you have to take before you can then centralise all of those people to sit together. Because as much as it's going to end up delivering on your bottom line by doing it, you also want to make sure that you keep your really talented people and that they remain with you and don't check out when you're asking for a full-scale change. And we were doing this because it was more efficient. It meant that we'd have a greater product because we're getting all the specialists together to learn from each other. And it also meant that there'd be a better processes, one process of doing this specialist skill set rather than 4 different ways of doing it, which was what was going on in the different agencies. There was a lot of influencing that had to happen as well. So I'm not a sort of leader where it's control and command. It's like, I'm in charge, so you've just got to do it. It was influencing and allowing people that time to give their views and allowing people that time to actually contribute as well to how we could make that process better. And so what you have on a plan in terms of how long it's going to take, double it. Because we're dealing with people's lives, so double it.
This is really resonating. So I've done lots of acquisitions and transformations as an investor, and you just do it in a spreadsheet. You add 2 numbers together and you do equals, and that's it. It's done. And this is the first time I feel I'm doing it as an operator, and it's really hammering home things like cultures. You know you've got your own culture, and you've got subcultures within that culture. But when you come together with another organization, you suddenly realize that actually all those subcultures work together within the bigger culture, and another alien culture is going to take a lot to bring together. And I was talking to one of the team who was sort of saying, well, what's our timing for this? And, we first need to create aligned vision of where we're going. And my response was, well, that we need to go as fast as we can, but on the subject to taking the people with us. If it takes longer, let's get the people right first. But it made me think that's actually probably a very unsophisticated way of thinking about it. I'm really curious to hear, are there frameworks you developed for thinking about that journey of taking people through transformation?
Look, I think there's always a timescale where you want an end date for that transformation to have happened, because you run a business, you've got a P&L, you've got a balance sheet. So there has to be a time frame for which that transformation has to happen within that window. The bit which I think is more fluid is you deciding the number of feedback loops and workshops and town halls or smaller working groups that's needed in order to start making it stick. That's the bit that's fluid. The end date is the end date, and you have to work towards an end date so that you can then see the fruits of your labour on a balance sheet. The bit that is fluid and is dependent on the organisations and the culture and the scale is the communication which happens in order to get there. You have to make sure that there is an announcement. You have to make sure that the leaders of the individual bits of the business are on board and you've got time with them. You then have to make sure that beyond those leaders, there's information that has to disseminate to other people. I cannot underplay how much you have to communicate when there is any transformation in place, and also feedback how we're doing.
When you say you can't overstate it, I mean, our cadence, we have a monthly town hall, and I have regular Ask Me Anythings with each of the teams in smaller groups. We have people analytics. So we do through a wide range of methodologies. We're constantly trying to build in those feedback loops. What is the sort of cadence?
So that's your normal rhythm of the business. When you're going through a transformation, that rhythm of the business is disrupted. So on top of your Ask Me Anything, your monthly town halls, there's extra interventions that have to happen. You can't put a transformation through the normal rhythm of the business. Build in time for workshops, build in times for an additional survey, which gets people to tell you what they think of this specific transformation process. build in a weekly update, if weekly is the right. You can't rely on your normal rhythm of the business. There are other interventions that now have to happen because the transformation isn't the normal rhythm of your business.
Which I guess goes back to your first point of why you need someone who's a specialist dedicated to this, because it really is above and beyond the business as usual. The final point that you sort of touched on was were these feedback loops. Are there, for a sort of board member listening to this, thinking, gosh, Karen, there's so much in there that we clearly need to do that we're not yet doing. What are the questions they should be asking, or how do they approach that as a board member to make sure these feedback loops and that pace is on the right course?
So if you are a UK company, there are certain things that you have to do in terms of governance anyway, which is making sure that you have somebody responsible for workforce engagement. That is an automatic feedback loop. So your board needs to make sure that whoever is leading workforce engagement during a period of transformation is feeding back to the board what they are hearing in the sessions that they hold. And one of the questions that they should be asking in the workforce engagement sessions is, does everybody buy into the strategy? How's everybody feeling about whatever the transformation is? That is your perfect opportunity for a board to hear, unfiltered from the team, what they're feeling and whether or not they believe in it. And as a board member, make sure that person responsible for workforce engagement feeds back in your next board meeting what they're hearing, because that's your opportunity to course correct.
What else? Any other things that are as powerful as that, as levers?
Look, as a board member, you should be accessible to the executive committee anyway, and make sure that you are accessible to, just make sure that they know that you're accessible, that you can WhatsApp, you can be called, you can be emailed. It's just making sure that as a board member, you're open for the executive team to communicate any concerns.
How do you do that? One thing that struck me about different board members I've worked with is sometimes it's easy as an exec to forget that you've got the board available to you. And I think some of the best board members I've worked with strike that balance of being proactive and just inserting themselves into your awareness at appropriate cadences, rather than just saying, hey, I'm here, call me whenever. And actually no one takes them up on that offer. Curious to hear how you do that beyond just saying I'm available.
Look, I say this now as a board member rather than a CEO that has asked a board member, you have to show interest in the business. Drop a note to the person that is responsible for whatever that thing is that you've seen, so that they know, oh, you're not just turning up to the board meeting and having a conversation. Actually, outside of the board meeting, you've still got skin in the game. And sending a message saying, I've seen X, or I was on my journey through the airport and I saw Y. You then know that board member's interested and that they're watching and that they're listening. Yeah.
It feels to me like we're at a moment in time where every organisation is experiencing a transformation of sorts, especially AI is sort of top of mind right now. But I'm really interested to hear how you are thinking as a board member about the future of an organisation like Diageo, which has so many macro trends ahead of it. Can you bring that to life, your kind of framework that a board member listening might be able to learn from?
So look, with Diageo, I joined the board of Diageo 3 years ago. Diageo talks about celebrating life every day, but it's not about getting people to drink more. It's getting people to drink better. The whole of the industry have got some headwinds in terms of health concerns about alcohol, lifestyle concerns about Gen Z, so 18 to 30-year-olds, whether or not they will be consuming alcohol. Actually, you do what any board would do, despite the VUCA world that we are living in. Strategy follows consumers. And it's as simple as that. So you dig down on your strategy. So your strategy follows consumers and your operations follow strategy. So what we are doing is really making sure that we genuinely understand consumers across the globe and the local nuances. So of course there are some macro trends, but how do those macro trends actually differ in local market? So really making sure that we understand 18 to 30-year-olds, and they are consuming alcohol. They just prioritize when they consume alcohol, and actually having the option to still go out and socialize and not drink alcohol means that leads to a whole range of NPD in terms of low alcohol or zero alcohol products for us to extend into. When it comes to health, Diageo have had Drink IQ, which they take incredibly responsibly, but have they surfaced it and communicated Drink IQ on a wider basis as part of their communications? No. Is it time to do that? Maybe. So the things that Diageo were always doing, it just maybe as the mood music has changed, actually surface what we have already been doing rather than just leaving it to be found on a website. Because they've always taken it responsibly. There's always been that governance over people's health and how people drink. And look, again, in terms of what Diageo are doing, is making sure that you've got the right talent, making sure that you have the right talent across, because Diageo is a global organisation of 28,000 people, the right talent that can, understand the consumers that they're trying to reach, but also B, leverage technology, which can now make the business more efficient in supply chain as well as in other areas of the business, whether that's marketing operations as well.
Can you bring that to life for me? I like that cascade of customer strategy operations. I'm just trying to think through, like, how does that look as a conversation in a boardroom?
Look, part of the conversation in the boardroom is about a deep dive on consumers and understanding those macro trends on consumers, what that means in terms of the categories that Diageo has. So whether that's tequila, whether it's NPD, whether it's acquisitions. So what does that mean? Once you understand that consumer dynamics and consumer insight, what does that mean in terms of the category in which we operate in? And then, look, in terms of supply chain and operations, part of that's about making sure that we don't talk digital strategy and we do talk AI strategy. I think we've gone beyond talking digital strategy that, whereas digital's like electricity, it's now we've moved on to talk about AI and how that affects all parts of the business, especially supply chain. There'll be a deep dive on where have we got some of our factories. Where are we looking at opening more, closing some? I mean, it's a whole area of effectiveness and efficiency, which we explore in greater detail.
One of the hardest parts of breaking into board roles is knowing how to reposition your career story in a way that demonstrates you will add value as a non-executive. New Role Plus is the expert in your corner, helping you craft your board narrative, build the governance skills boards expect, and unlock 500 additional live board opportunities annually. Go to plus.newrole.com to find out more. So that AI conversation is one boards everywhere I see are wrestling with massively. I'm fascinated to understand how you're approaching the enormity of that topic. Are you kind of doing deep dives in particular areas? Is it a top level?
The board level, I would say it's more top level. Within the global exec, they've got AI teams that have formed. But at the board level, it is more surface level to understand the strategy and what's happening. It is a daily conversation for the exec, and it's a daily conversation for the AI task teams that they've put together. And again, at the board level, part of what our challenge would be as board directors is whether or not do you need somebody on the board that's got, as a NED, that has got expertise in AI, or does that expertise exist within the exec? So those are conversations that you have.
It's interesting. We've been running these pop-up boards where we bring together people, a group on demand around particular topics for CEOs or boards. And we've just done one on AI, which was absolutely mind-blowing to see. I think what was striking to me about that was realizing that you cannot have that level of specialism and expertise on your board every day, certainly not across all topics. But if you can somehow pull together that group for a specific issue, then it becomes really powerful.
Yeah, so you put together an advisory board that you tap into.
So for a board member listening to this who's wrestling with how do they add value on this AI challenge as a board member, any framework that you have in your head for thinking about how you go about that?
That I think you have to speak to people who are experts, and it depends if your board member has left an executive role a long time ago or if it's more recent. You have to make sure that somewhere you are tuned into people who are still doing it day in, day out. And you have to have those conversations, which is, right, what are the 5 things I need to know today on everything I need to know on AI? What's the latest thing that's happening on digital twins? You have to have some point of contact or interaction with somebody that is doing it day in, day out as an executive role, just to do give me the 5 things I need to know this week. Also, subscribe to some stuff. There's plenty of stuff out there on the Tinternet that you can sort of subscribe to, whether that's Business Insider, whether that's Harvard Business Review. You can't pretend it's something that's going on elsewhere and you haven't got a clue. If you've got the bandwidth and the capacity, Oxford do a 10-week course. Cambridge do, I don't know how long their course is, but Cambridge do a course. All of them do courses on understanding AI. Just do a course just to make sure you're on top of it.
Can we move on to talk about brand? You've helped and build and advised some of the world's biggest brands, from Coca-Cola to Tesco to Google. Interested to hear how, from your perspective, the boardroom conversation around brand and marketing has evolved and where you see boards most often misunderstanding brand value.
It's really interesting because I think now, 30 years in working in marketing communications, boards understand how brands can deliver growth and performance. Whereas at the beginning of my career, I don't think that was understood, that brand was always an intangible asset. And I think we are now in a place where people understand the value of brands in terms of delivery, that for every 1% you have an increase in brand awareness, it delivers X in terms of growth, whatever that definition of growth may be for that particular business. So I think that is better understood. I also think it is better understood about the importance of having a brand and the importance of having a purpose when it comes to crisis comms as well. I think that is much better understood, that link between brand and that critical crisis management when something's gone wrong. And if you have a purpose, you're more easily forgiven. I think that is understood as well. And that was not the case at the beginning of my career. I think there was genuinely on boards a perception that marketing comms was some sort of balloon arches that happened. So, some sort of event which made everybody feel good, but that actually didn't have any ROI. And I think people understand marketing ROI in boardrooms now in terms of overall balance sheet, bottom line performance, corporate reputation.
So if that's improved, where do you see the remaining greatest challenges?
I think it goes back to the conversation that we've just had, which is the greatest challenge about building brands is how much of that is people and how much of that is AI. I think that's the conversation that's happening now about, can we get AI to do the storytelling of a brand? And it can, to a certain extent. It absolutely can. But you do need human intervention. So that's the biggest challenge, or the biggest conversations that are happening now. how much is done by AI and how much is done by talented individual. And I never think it should be either or, it's both. It should never be either or.
That's really interesting. I hadn't actually thought about it like that, because I guess one of the challenges with human talent is it can walk out the door or it can die, and you've invested all that investment into creating the brand equity around, if it is a sort of individual, whereas I guess AI goes on into perpetuity or for as long as we're all around. What makes you say it shouldn't be an either or? Because as you frame it in that way, at least I think, well, actually that's a no-brainer to go down the AI, because you don't have that risk anymore.
Because by the very nature of AI and how it works, it crowdsources information that's already there. So it crowdsources information and it's machine learning and it learns. You still need human beings that can bring light and shade, that can bring humour, that AI, as of yet, does not understand humour. It doesn't. It still needs brilliant storytelling. It still needs an expert to say, we need to shoot this particular bit of content using this camera lens at this angle. That still needs somebody that's an expert and talented to be able to train the AI to do that, if it's generative AI that we're talking about. I was at a Creative UK event where there was a brilliant panel, which the composer that had done all the score for the Avatar films, there was a guy that was using AI working for the UN in terms of solving conflicts, the chief AI officer for WPP, and somebody else that had created a business that they'd sold to SoundCloud. And it was a discussion about AI in the creative industries. And actually, the composer he had such a good point. He sort of said, look, in my world, you work 20 years before you make any money, and you work your way up, and then you get to a point where a brilliant film director will come and say, can you write the score for this film? And the thing with AI is that film directors are brilliant visually, they're not necessarily brilliant in terms of sound. But with AI, you've got some that feel as they can do it themselves. And he said the problem with AI is that it wipes out all of those lower level roles that you've done to work yourself way up, so that you then get to become an expert at the top of your field. It wipes out all of those lower level, more manual, non-paying roles. And he said, but the thing is, it averages everything. So it's looking at everything and it just averages everything. And I'll never, he said, and so what you end up with, and excuse my language, he says, what you end up with is waves of shit. He said, you don't get something that's unique. You don't get something that's one of a kind. It's just learnt from everything that it's found and it's averaged it all. And there's something in that if you haven't worked your way up to then be able to understand what good looks like. But if you can work in conjunction with AI, having done all of the jobs on the way up to help AI work out what good looks like, it's still going to need that human intervention. Sorry, that was a very long answer to something.
No, I think that's really interesting, that sort of idea that it might be in the short term that you're better off using AI, but in getting better, you're accelerating your path to average mediocrity. And if you have lost all your sort of human talent at that point, you've got no point of differentiation.
It's a brilliant tool which helps do things at scale, do things faster, do things more efficiently, but it's a tool. It's a tool that should be used by talented individuals, which is why I say it's not either or.
Like most functions, marketing itself is undergoing rapid change. For board members who don't have marketing background, are there questions you think they should be asking to ensure their organisation's marketing strategies are on top of?
Yeah, it's what's the consumer doing, and the consumer differs by market. So don't just take a generic answer in terms of the consumer's doing X. Ask, how does that differ by market, or how does that differ by area? So it always starts with the consumer and understanding how it differs. and also how that may differ by age or by ethnicity or by gender. So really, you've got to really focus on people, because that's what marketing is. It's literally understanding people and being able to influence and fit in with their behaviours. That's what marketing is. So always start with that consumer insight and that understanding. Always then think about route to market. And again, that goes back to insights and behaviours that you may have observed. So are we thinking about route to market for a particular product or brand, and understanding how that route to market might need to change, and also how the product might need to change? So if I think about the alcohol beverage industry, pack size, think about material for the bottles that we use. It's how might it need to change? We've always had on-trade and off-trade. Are there new vehicles that we need to explore which are different to the on-trade areas that we've always been available in? But again, that goes back to understanding consumer insight. It always starts with people. But for a non-marketing literate board member, question about people. How does that differ by gender, race, age, location, and what's the route to market?
Can we move on before we go to the lightning round to talk about culture and inclusion? Because you've been an incredible champion of culture and inclusion. Curious to hear, when have you been proudest of the cultural change you've created at an organisation, either as an exec or a non-exec?
Look, I believe that I would not have had the career that I had, and I would not have been in the industry that I had if my, very early bosses hadn't thought about there's something there, there's some talent there, and they ignored the fact that I did not have the same background as people coming into the industry. I didn't go to one of the Russell Group universities. I did not go to one of the advertising sort of art school recruitment vehicles. I didn't know anybody in advertising. But, my very first bosses, the people that interviewed me, saw something and they ignored that. And I always think about, I just want, and I talk about it a lot, and, people would have heard me say it a lot. I just want to create an amazing Avengers assemble of superheroes. I really do, because A, it's fun working with people that have got different skill sets to you, and B, it is the source of creativity. It's where you problem solve. It's where you come up with ideas, where you get people coming together from all walks of life, and you really do get diversity of thought to really problem solve. That's in pursuit of performance and growth. So I've always championed trying to make sure that we get loads of different people from different backgrounds coming together to problem solve. A, because it's great for creativity. B, because it's good for your bottom line, and that's been proven by enough surveys. And it's fun. And actually, it's about future-proofing as well, because within that team, you're going to start reflecting future consumers as well. You've got to represent the people that you're trying to tell a story to. And the best advertising is when it's based on an insight which is real. The best way of finding them, mining those insights, is to have lots of different people that can bring insights to you. From the very first apprenticeship scheme that myself and a fabulous head of future talent at Mediacom created, Nancy Lanthorne, our apprenticeship scheme, being the first to do that. I mean, it's ridiculous. This was 2012, the first sort of government-backed apprenticeship, which actively went to look at 18 to 25-year-olds who came from diverse backgrounds to bring them into the organisation, specifically working with a training provider where we went into schools with above average exam results, but also above average reliance on subsidised school meals. So you had that talent there, but not necessarily the opportunity. From that, and that became the norm for the industry. Myself and Nancy and the team purposely put together a playbook and gave it to other agencies. This wasn't about a competitive advantage. This is about changing our industry to make sure it was future-proofed. From doing that through to creating routes across WPP, which is a ERG focused on cultural heritage, which started in Ogilvy, saw how brilliant it was in Ogilvy, created the network across other WPP organisations, through to actually having the research and data. So the consumer equality equation, which with Ogilvy Consulting and Shalina, we developed to look at the value of different ethnic audiences to clients so that they understood the value that they could bring if you brought them into your brand and got them transacting and absorbing your brand, what you could actually deliver on your bottom line. So not just a nice to do, but actually a business reason to do it. So there's a range of things that I'm proud of, which I hope doesn't roll back in the current climate that we're in.
So for a board member listening to this who's thinking to themselves, gosh, Karen, that sounds absolutely incredible. I want to challenge our organisation to do that. What did the business case look like? Can you bring that to life? Was it a question of, well, here's the cost and then this is our estimated increase in...
It was as simple as that. It was, if I look at the consumer equality equation, it was, what's the cost of doing this piece of research? And we started it in the pandemic, so it took 2 years. Who are the organisations and businesses that we know have got a growth challenge, who we know could go further in terms of the people that they are trying to reach, because they are, I don't know, products which we know different ethnic audiences in the UK consume and buy, but we're not featuring them properly in our brand stories. We're not properly targeting them. We could actually do more, get the results, get the bums on seats if we actually understood how to talk to them and got them to interact with our brands more. So everything from luxury brands who don't target ethnic minority audiences through to retailers, groceries, beauty organisations, areas where, there's been a toe in the water, but not enough. And this helps them give them the confidence to go a bit further. So yes, there's a cost of doing the research, and then these are the organisations that we think we can go to then talk about how they do more.
Karen, time has flown, which means it's time for the lightning round, where I'm going to ask you a short question and ask you for a quick response if you're ready.
Okay, I'll try and be quick.
Best book every board member should read and why?
The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. It is a brilliant way of understanding how to lead people and get the best out of people. But there's also Inspire, Discover, Transform, which is based on participants that have been on the Windsor Leadership course. So you've got, I think it's like 50 different business leaders that are giving you their pearls of wisdom. That's another good book.
Boardroom behaviour that irritates you most?
Oh God, somebody that showboats and they just talk for talking's sake. Somebody that hogs the mic. Cannot stand it.
Most valuable board ritual?
I'm going to say something that I introduced for my boards when I was a CEO, which was an agenda item, which is BOTI, B-O-T-I, which is better out than in. So if there's something that is really annoyed you, get it off your chest in the boardroom in that meeting. Don't go outside and bitch. Get it off your chest in that room. So it was a standing agenda item rather than AOB, BOTI. So I'm known for that, BOTI on the agenda.
Favourite quote?
It's from my dad. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion.
Worst professional advice you've ever received?
There was an organisation that I joined when I was starting in my career, that gave advice about how to dress to be taken seriously. And I remember going along to this event and a workshop, and it was, if you have curly hair, wear tailored suits. If you have straight hair, wear flouncy dresses. And I thought, what on earth has that got to do with my ability and talent? So telling me how to dress and colours that I should wear, worst possible advice.
What have you changed your mind on about boards over time?
That they're show and tell, that they can't really get involved in the business and help the business. Sometimes I have been on boards where you feel as though it's show and tell and keep the board happy rather than really wanting to use the board to help grow the business.
When was the last time you got a significant judgment call wrong in the boardroom, and what did you learn?
I mean, I get things wrong a lot. It wasn't a boardroom thing. So it's not a boardroom thing. It's seeing how somebody was treated in a meeting and not saying anything that made me feel as though I was complicit to how somebody was being treated by their manager. And one of my values is always be kind. And somebody said to me, you can be hard on the issue, not the person. Always be hard on the issue, not the person. And you can reprimand somebody, but you do it in private. When you do it one-to-one, you don't do it with an audience, and you should always be kind.
How are you better today as a board member than when you started?
I will bring you to the question that I just answered. Sometimes you've got organisations that aren't performing as they should do. Sometimes you have organisations which are in change and in transition. And I think as a board member, I am sensitive to how the exec team will be feeling. As a board member, I've been there and I've done it, so I sort of understand how they're feeling. And so as a board member, I think I am more intuitive, also more purposeful, and also I think I'm more helpful. I think I've really learned how to influence.
And finally, 3 things our listeners should take away from this episode if they take nothing else.
3 things. Do not underestimate the importance of communication if you're trying to inflict change and over-communicate. Make sure that you try and spend time with exec members, or you're accessible to exec members, so that you become a trusted advisor, because that's what you should be as a board member, a trusted advisor. And 2 ears, 1 mouth. Really listen to what's going on when you're a board member. Really listen, because what people tell you isn't always what is happening.
Reminds me of someone talking recently to me about the different ways that you can listen, and listening to hear what people say, and then a level above that to listening to hear how people are feeling, which I found quite a powerful distinction.
That's absolutely true.
Karen, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and experience.
Pleasure.
If you want to accelerate your board career and become a more attractive board candidate, Neural Plus gives you expert support, tailored guidance, and a much wider pool of live board roles. Listeners get a 10% discount. Head to plus.neural.com and apply the code ENTER at checkout.